Thank you, sir.
Okay. Record now. Yeah, thank you, and excellent. Appreciate that. We just mentioned to the folks that we were going to be recording it, so now we've been our promises made, promises kept, right? We'll do one more sound check, and then we'll begin. Shauna, have you joined us? Shauna, are you on the line? Hi, Shauna, are you on the line?
Oh, can you hear me now, Ray?
We can hear you now. All right, Shauna.
Wonderful.
Welcome.
Success.
Okay. We'll mute you and bring you on for the second round. Folks, it's my pleasure, Ray Ledgerwood, to introduce you to our webinar today on success stories of voluntary incentive-based conservation programs. We're also going to hear from our Executive Director, Mike Brown, in just a few minutes with some opening comments. My pleasure to go over a few logistics with you as we begin the webinar today. One, if you are up on the, if you're listening to us just by voice, you can go to the webinar using the webinar ID 418-180-027. And you can join at the computer link www.joingotowebinar.com. If you're on the other part of this, we hope that you'll read the screen there and hook up to the audio. What a pleasure it is to be with you. It's my pleasure to introduce Mike Brown, our NASCA Executive Director, to start our webinar this morning. Mike?
Ray, thanks very much, and folks, thanks for joining us this morning. You know, we talk all the time about all the great work we've done over a lot of years now, but one thing we're not very good at doing is talking about the work we've done, and that's what we're going to do today. Here are a few examples of some outstanding work and some success stories where state agencies and districts have worked together to really address resource concerns in their area. And at the conclusion of today's webinar, we're going to talk about some things we can do to keep that conversation going. So speakers, thanks very much for stepping up and sharing your stories. Thanks for all the participants. And Ray, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate those opening comments. Some logistics for today's webinar. All of our lines are going to be muted for the participants except for our presenters. We'll unmute them and have them speak with you, and then mute them back up again. We're going to use questions via the web. Using the dashboard on your computer is the best way to enter those questions because we've got those lines muted. We're going to get to as many questions as we can during the course of the next couple of hours and after the presentations are completed. We occasionally have some testimonials, but we have such a great turnout of success stories. I doubt that we'll do testimonials today unless we have time. We'll see how much time we have. Our presentation is being recorded, and just in case you wanted to share it with colleagues or go back and refer to it. Feedback is always welcome. In fact, kudos, comments, those suggestions you have for the next webinar to Mike Brown at the email address shown on your screen. So our description for today's webinar, it's an informational webinar on the success stories of voluntary incentive-based conservation programs that Mike just mentioned. And we're going to learn from the presentations from across our great nation about that voluntary work done by our land managers, assisted by conservation districts, partners, supported by the state conservation agencies, and learn about the successes that we've had out across the nation. Here's our agenda for today's session, and you can see that we've got it packed pretty full today, so just wanted to make mention that we're going to do 2 rounds of presentations. The first round, we'll have Minnesota, Colorado, Texas, and Missouri representatives talking about their success stories. We'll stop then and take some questions on the dashboard that you'll be entering for the speakers, and we'll have them respond to those questions. and then we'll do our second round of presentations that will include representatives from Iowa, Oklahoma, Washington State, and then our own NASCA, Mike Brown, will be talking with us about how these success stories will be used. Questions and responses, and then we'll close as close to noon Eastern time as we can possibly do. Okay, Mike, any last minute comment before we move to our first speaker?
No, Ray, I'd say let's go ahead and get to the first speaker.
Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Steve, Christopher, and Brad Woolsney. And Brad and Steve, take it away, please.
All right, thanks, Ray. I'm Steve Christopher and serve as field staff in the Twin Cities metro area of Minnesota. Along with my colleague, Central Region Clean Water Specialist Brad Woolsney, we will be presenting the Targeted Watershed Program for the Chisago Chain of Lakes. The Board of Water and Soil Resources has a unique role as a bridge between the legislature and more than 240 local governments, including 89 soil and water conservation districts. We view the local governments as our conservation delivery system, so we work through them providing programmatic, technical, and financial assistance to get conservation on the ground. Our agency focuses primarily on natural resource concerns on private lands, which make up approximately 75% of the state, and over 85% of our budget is pass-through funding to local governments and landowners for implementation. The main funding driver for many of our programs is the Clean Water Fund, which was the largest conservation ballot measure in United States history. It is expected to raise at least $250 million per year for 25 years. Ultimately, Clean Water Fund projects must be addressing a prioritized water resource, be effective and targeted practices, meaning that they are the right BMP in the right location at the right price. Projects also must have significant measurable outcomes for water quality. Local governments must be able to estimate the project's effects with respect to the overall resource goal. This ensures that we are spending the funds where they'll do the greatest good. Targeted watershed grants are funded through the Clean Water Fund application process, where grants are awarded to local government units organized for the management of water in a watershed that have multi-year plans that will result in a significant reduction in water pollution in a selected sub-watershed. Chisago County is located at the north end of the Twin Cities metro area and includes both urban and rural areas. The Chisago Soil and Water conducted several assessments within the Chain of Lakes sub-watershed. There's a Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and EPA-approved TMDL study and protection and restoration plan for the Chain of Lakes sub-watershed. The TMDL found a need for a reduction of 6,200 pounds. Stormwater retrofit assessments had been completed for all of the urban areas and all of the rural areas in 2015 by the Chisago SWCD. Now I'll turn things over to Brad.
Thanks, Steve. The urban and rural subwatershed assessments that Steve mentioned yielded separate lists of specific projects in rank order of cost effectiveness. For planning purposes, the SWCD prioritized lakes that are impaired and those with declining water quality trends very near the tipping point of impairment. So if you combine those priorities with the subwatershed analyses and erosion potential map, the SWCD staff determined a schedule for target marketing to landowners within the subwatersheds for each year of the grant as shown on this slide. Fortunately, NRCS took note of our successful Targeted Watershed Grant Program and began piggybacking Healthy Watersheds Initiative awards such that federal funds could be matched with state and local funds and vice versa. The Chisago Lakes Chain of Lakes project was awarded approximately $460,000 over a 5-year period for conservation projects in this subwatershed. We selected this grant project to present today because of the extensive water quality studies completed, but also for the diverse actions proposed to remedy the water quality problems. So in the next several slides, I'll highlight some traditional and innovative approaches that they are implementing. So this slide represents the various ag BMPs identified in the rural subwatershed assessments, such as water and sediment control structures, filter strips, waterways, and gully stabilization. Staff are ahead of schedule on this
in this category and are close to achieving the goal of implementing 25 of these practices. This is a unique category of projects which utilizes incentive payments to promote cover crops and permanent vegetative plantings, as well as incentive payments to cities for targeted and more frequent street sweeping. 2 of the 3 key cities have participated in the street sweeping program. Another tool in the toolbox used by the SWCD was to leverage efforts to bolster city stormwater management and erosion control ordinances under new and redevelopment scenarios. So they offer to partner with cities to provide dedicated construction site inspection services to ensure proper enforcement. And here again, 2 of the 3 key cities have adopted new ordinance packages. The goal in urban stormwater management is to install approximately 40 urban BMPs, such as the usual rain gardens, rock line channels, and something we call iron enhanced sand filters and stormwater retrofits to achieve a 50-pound reduction of phosphorus per year. The SWCD also works with city street departments to install innovative inlet filters in catch basins that drain directly to a lake or stream. This further enhances the street sweeping efforts. The SWCDs and cities jointly employ a summer intern to assist with installation, clean out, and maintenance of the filter bags. I won't discuss the individual line items in this budget other than to say that the project in its totality exceeds $1.1 million if you consider the federal funds and other local match funds they received after the Targeted Watershed Grant Award. Our Targeted Watershed program doesn't just pay for project construction, but rather all project phases such as outreach and marketing strategies in high priority areas, direct landowner contacts, and technical assistance and engineering. This is a signed template by the Chisago SWCD that is permanently displayed on visible Targeted Watershed project sites. Noteworthy here are all the partnerships formed to achieve the water quality goals. Overall, this grant project will reduce approximately 690 pounds of phosphorus, which is around 11% of the TMDL goal. The SWCD is garnering a lot of success and momentum and is already seeking additional funding for future phases of this watershed project. Simply put, improved waters, improved communities. And for further follow-up, I would be willing to chat with folks at the regional NASCA conference in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Thank you.
Outstanding, Brad and Steve. We just appreciate your presentation. That's an exciting activity there, and we're looking forward to the folks following up. And I appreciate you saying that. Not only can they ask questions today on their dashboard, but we'll also make available your contact information if you're okay with that, and for folks that want to reach out to you and learn more and build one of these in their state. Steve, Brad, any last minute anything? You're still within your timeline if you had the last comment you want to make.
No, I think we could just wait for the questions.
Okay, stay on the line. I'm sure the questions will start pouring in. Just a reminder, go ahead and enter your questions on the dashboard. Thanks so much, Steve and Brad. It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. We have Patrick O'Neill from the San Luis Valley Soil Health Regeneration Project. Patrick comes from Colorado. And Patrick, take it away, Patrick.
Good morning. My name is Patrick O'Neill, and I serve as supervisor and board president of our local conservation district. Our conservation district is called Mosca-Hooper Conservation District, and it encompasses Alamosa County, which is located in the San Luis Valley in south central Colorado. And our conservation district is has a relatively small budget. However, we make great efforts to to remain relevant in our agricultural community, our ranching and farming community. Where we are located is in a alpine valley. It's the largest high altitude valley in the world. Our elevation is 7,500 feet at the valley floor, and the mountains surrounding us are between 10,000 and 14,000 foot peaks. The San Juan Mountains are to our west, and the Sangre de Cristo Mountains are to our east. The Great Sand Dunes National Park is in our backyard and adjoins our conservation district. So, as you can imagine, soil erosion is of great concern to us. The processes and the practices that lead up to soil erosion are as well. This project that I'm describing today involved an effort to engage farmers and ranchers in soil health testing. One of the participants was a large land holding of 103,000 acres named the Zapata Ranch, which is owned by the Nature Conservancy. And we had a number of participants, but that was the largest land holding that engaged it. In our region, we have about 8,000 square miles of farmland. It is one of the regions of the United States where fresh market potatoes are grown extensively, and as is malting barley for a couple different maltsters, Miller Coors and Proximity Malt. There are over 6,000 agricultural wells that have been developed since the late 1800s in our valley. The bulk of those still productive and active wells. Because our average annual rainfall is 7 inches a year, irrigation is vital to our valley. We have been in a multi-year drought beginning in 2002, which caused an intense aquifer overdraft on the part of our wells, and we are in the process of recovering our aquifer through a coordinated effort across counties where farmers are managing more intensively their irrigation withdrawals from the aquifer. This soil health regeneration project, what we intended it to do specifically was to look at the conservation efforts and restoration efforts that are ongoing on farms and ranches within the San Luis Valley, and partner or provide a cost share opportunity to partner with those local landowners to give them a baseline information about the status of their soil using a testing protocol that they may not be engaging on an annual or regular basis, and things that are novel and new to many of them, and making available technical assistance for those lab analyses to be interpreted, and for the farmer and rancher to be able to understand what may they do uniquely or differently going forward in order to foster more soil health. And beyond that, how can they use the data to benefit their marketing efforts when they go to market the products that they've grown, so that they can be recognized for their conservation efforts. So our conservation district partnered with a local nonprofit named the San Luis Valley Local Foods Coalition, whose mission is to make available local foods to bolster economic development within our region, and to make good food available to the general population. So the San Luis Valley Local Foods Coalition has a food hub, which is a food distribution facility which does marketing of locally produced foods. And the food hub itself took on the role of helping develop some marketing materials for those practitioners using soil health testing and soil health practices and principles in the production of their food and of their products. So our efforts are in educating both those who are producing the food and those who are buying the food about the important role that soil health management has in developing sustainable farming systems and in developing great food for consumption. And the way that we structured this particular project was in looking at a cost share where the farmer or the rancher would pay 50% of the cost of well, would pay 50% of the total cost, the costs being on the district side, the technical advising and the sample collection and the lab analysis of the soil health samples. If you could advance the slide, please. So here's how the cost share broke down. The NASCA Conservation District paid lab fees for soil health testing, and these were an aggregate tests of the Haney test, a standard soil chemistry suite, along with what's called a phospholipid fatty acid analysis. Combined, the cost in a commercial lab was about $150. So we had tapped grant funding in order to pay for that component of the cost share, and the farmers themselves paid an approximately equivalent amount in order to contract a certified crop advisor in order to gather the samples. We have locally within our district some specialists in soil health who volunteered, some of whom were on our board, who volunteered to sit down with the farmers and ranchers who engaged this process and talk through with them some ideas on what the analyses mean and practices they may try out in order to become and to develop more healthy soil environments. A total of 49 producers were engaged across our region, and it covers a management area of over 10,000 acres from those sampled sites. The Valley Roots Food Hub, the distribution facility that I had mentioned, which is a project of the San Luis Valley Local Foods Coalition, had 14 vendors within their network of people regularly selling to them, who identified themselves as individuals who, from in one way or another, were fostering the health of their soil, and 3 of these participated directly in the Moss Cooper Conservation District's cost share program in order to do more extensive soil testing. Next slide, please. And what came of this? This was a 1-year effort. The soil test information has been used in the planning process of sitting down with farmers and with ranchers to assess soil health and talk through options of inoculants, compost use, cover crops, selection of cover crop seeds, identifying potential quality issues for the crops to be produced, whether that be yield or marketability, and overall cost assessments on cost of production. So these were things that the farmers themselves directly got to experience in engaging this process. Beyond that, we got further exposure in the marketplace for our food products, for San Luis Valley grown soil health practices deployed, so that people could understand where their food's coming from and how it's being handled and how the soil is being treated in order to get them the high quality food that they request. So it gives consumers an opportunity to vote for the environment with their food dollars. And where we go, our primary objective in cost sharing, basically getting the idea out that these are accessible testing methods that farmers can engage. That's been accomplished. The Local Food Coalition's objective to do branding around the soil health principles and soil health practices is ongoing, and the objective of partnering directly with producers about the importance of soil health, that our conservation district continues. The testing that farmers can do on their own, the interpretation, they can engage local consultants or NRCS officials to be able to give them guidance on what to do or ideas on what they could do towards conservation and building soil health. So the partnership is well underway, and we're excited about where it goes. And that's the end of my presentation.
Patrick, we must thank you for this presentation on your project. It's outstanding, and we may bring you back for a webinar on board involvement. Would you be interested in that?
Oh, sure.
Most impressive, the amount of work your board has put into this, and the work that they did in helping the farmers with their choices on good soil health. But Patrick, if you'll hold on the line, the questions we'll take up here in a little bit after our next two presenters.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Patrick. My pleasure to introduce Tony Franklin, and Tony will be talking with us about the Texas Water Quality Management Plan. Tony?
All right, yes, sir. And again, I'm Tony Franklin. I work for the Texas State Soil and Water Conservation Board, and that's what we're going to be discussing is in Texas our water quality management plans. So some of the things we're going to be talking about is first, I need to give you an overview of kind of how it's structured in Texas and talk a little bit about the soil and water conservation districts, give you all a brief overview about water quality management plans, what that entails. And then specifically we're going to talk about today is the Lower San Antonio River watershed. Give you all a little history of that project, how it started, some of the conservation work that was implemented, and some of the outcomes that we saw. So what are soil and water conservation districts? So first, to begin with, the Texas State Soil and Water Conservation Board, the agency that I work with, we administer Texas's soil and water conservation law, and we coordinate conservation non-point source pollution throughout the state. A role of the state board of the TSS-WCB was to organize Texas into soil and water conservation districts in areas where there was a need expressed by local landowners. And today, if y'all look at that map, we have 216 soil and water conservation districts organized across Texas. And this is important, but the program and plan of work of the district is developed according to the local needs of the district. So what are water quality management plans, or WQMPs? The passage of Senate Bill 503 by the Texas legislature in the mid-1990s directed the TSS-WCB to implement water quality management plans in Texas. A water quality management plan is a site-specific plan developed through and approved by local soil and water conservation districts. The plan includes appropriate land treatment practices, production practices, management measures, and so forth. And the purpose of a WQMP is to achieve a level of pollution prevention or abatement determined by the TSS-WCB in consultation with the local soil and water conservation district, and obviously it needs to be consistent with state water quality standards. Now, the map that you are looking at right now, these are watersheds that were clustered in south central Texas. To kind of give you an idea where we're looking at, if y'all see the one designated SWCD number 330, that's Bexar County, so that's like San Antonio. Go Spurs, go! Obviously. So these watersheds in south central Texas, they did not meet, or they do not meet, the water quality standards for bacteria established to protect contact recreation. And so the one we're looking at specifically is kind of the green watershed. You'll see there's a mark there designated red dot Kennedy. This project started back in 2005, and so the TSS-WCB worked with the NRCS and established the EQIP State Resource Concern for water quality in south central Texas. And this was directed towards the protection of streams impacted by bacterial contamination from livestock. And let me say this, that by no means was anybody blaming livestock or ag producers for this bacteria impairment, because if that was the case, the local Karnes County Soil and Water Conservation District would have had no part with this project. But instead they knew that there was potential there, and really they wanted to promote this project and work with ag producers, work with livestock producers to show that they were doing their part. And so the state board, the TSS-WCB, administered Federal 319 funds to the Karnes County Soil and Water Conservation District for the support of a full-time district technician that was going to go out and work with these livestock producers and write water quality management plans. Another thing that's unique in Texas that's probably different from other states, at least with the districts that I meet with, is there's not enough funds available to have full-time district employees. Now, the soil and water conservation districts are housed and work with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, but the employees are predominantly part-time employees, and usually you're looking at like bookkeepers or admin staff, and again, nobody really full-time. So this was unique in that district was able to get a full-time employee. Now, his name was Harvey Calden, and one of the things that he's retired from NRCS, and he said the biggest practice that he started promoting was prescribed grazing. And so with that, obviously they had to work with producers, and they had to get new fences built so they could incorporate rotational grazing plans. And Harvey was always stressing to these producers that they needed grass to grow. And so this meant long deferments on rangeland, and I know he worked with a lot of producers, and they had a lot of the native grasses recover in certain areas, and also worked with a lot of producers on pasture land, working with them to do proper pest management and nutrient management practices. And so with these new fields that were created with these fences meant that there needed to be new water. So a goal of this project was to promote alternative water sources, get it away from the San Antonio River, get it away from the creeks and the streams in that watershed. So a lot of these producers drilled new water wells, installed pumping plants on those wells, new pipelines were put in place, and new troughs and water storage facilities were built. And one thing too that was stressed in the life of this project was that producers weren't mandated to fence off these riparian areas. Everything in this project was done on a voluntary basis. So in some cases, a producer might have opted to fence off that riparian area and defer grazing, but by no means were they required to. There was a lot of other producers that did fence it off, but they incorporated that riparian area as part of their grazing management plan. But the main thing that they wanted to do was get the cattle out of the creek and not have them camp out there all of the time. Towards the end of this project, one of the things that, in addition to prescribed grazing, that Harvey really started promoting, and the district started promoting as well, was soil health and soil health practices. And so this, Harvey worked with producers with cover crops and no-till farming, the cover crops on pasture and cropland, and even in certain cases, some high-intensity grazing, mob grazing approach in that prescribed grazing plan. The Karnes County Soil and Water Conservation District utilized this project and kind of incorporated it to their work plan to promote the good work that could be done with water quality management plans. They had a few field days where they had a water quality management plan tour. In fact, it was on the chairman of the board's property. He had done a lot of work where he had done some brush work. He had done some native grass planting, installed new fences, installed new water troughs, and he was actually even doing a lot of trapping of wild hogs. So they had that tour, and then also towards the end of the project, they started doing some soil health projects, so some soil health seminars for producers, and also some tours on cropland, and a tour that they did with the producer that utilizes mob grazing to improve soil health. So the map now that we're looking at right now, this is a success story. So what were the results? So this project ended in 2014, and I think Harvey was hired around 2006, 2007, sometime in that area, and he wrote approximately 110 water quality management plans with producers, mainly in Karnes County, but also in some of these neighboring counties. Me personally, I think that's a success story right there. Anytime you can get that much conservation on the ground, I mean, that's a good thing. But we also needed data. We also needed real results. And if y'all look there, there is a stream designated as segment 1901-05, and that is a red line there. Now that samples were taken back in 2012, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe that the impairment level for E. coli is 126 CFUs, somewhere around there. So that red line sampled in 2012, it measured at 140.38. The last sampling data that we have was done in 2014. It had decreased to 110.67 CFUs. The other stream segment, which is the purple line there down towards the bottom right end of the watershed, designated as segment 1901-01. Again, in 2012, it sampled at 145.13 CFUs, and in 2014, that had decreased to 109.53 CFUs. And so those segments have been delisted as they're no longer impaired, and I know a lot of the other segments, stream segments in this watershed are trending downward. So that kind of accomplished the goals of doing this project. The other success story that I'll say, this project ended, and so Harvey is actually still working for that Soil and Water Conservation District now, just as a part-time employee. But others took notice of the good work that not only what he did, but also what the Karnes County Soil and Water Conservation District did. And so Karnes County itself has increased its allocation to the Soil and Water Conservation District to help out, to provide funds to keep Harvey working in the watershed. And likewise, there is the San Antonio River Authority, which is headquartered there in San Antonio, obviously. They've also provided grant dollars to the Karnes County Soil and Water Conservation to, again, assist Harvey with his time to follow up with a lot of these producers that he wrote water quality management plans for, to do status reviews with them to see, if they're following their plan or if that needs to be updated. And they've also provided some grant dollars to the board as well to continue holding educational events, to have, more water quality management plan tours, and also a lot more soil health seminars and tours as well. So I thought that was a pretty good success for the local district. And if we got time, guys, that's all I have, unless y'all have some questions.
Tony, thanks so much. Another outstanding success story. And I must admit, I learned a term, mob grazing. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can't wait till the question time. We can learn a little bit more about mob grazing. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you so much for that presentation, and we'll get to questions here in a bit. It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker then, and that's Jake Wilson. Jake is with the Missouri Soil and Water Conservation Program. And Jake, take it away, please.
Good morning. As Ray said, my name is Jake Wilson, and I work for the Missouri DNR Soil and Water Conservation Program as a district coordinator. And I'm going to talk to you about a novel funding stream that we've been able to tap into for some cost share practices here in Missouri. So basically, what is natural resource damage and assessment and restoration? It's essentially determining where natural resources have been injured by hazardous substance releases like mining, waste, or industrial pollutants, things like that, and then using funding from the responsible parties to restore resources in that area. So that's basically where this comes from. This is all made possible by what's generally known as the Superfund Law, and that's the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act, which was put in place as a response to hazardous waste contamination like that in Love Canal, New York, which is a famous example. And even here in Missouri, we've got a couple of Superfund sites where the EPA is doing cleanup and remediation. Many of you are probably familiar with those types of situations as well. But that law also allows for using those funds from the bad actors for restoration to basically compensate the public for damages that were done. In Missouri, we have basically the trustee council, which is made up of some representatives from DNR, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and others, and they basically are in charge of this fund, and they decide kind of how it gets used within the state. And a few years ago, they released a request for proposals to do restoration work in 2 areas of Missouri, southeast and southwest. And basically our program, the role that we had in all this was we put together a grant proposal to do restoration work through our current cost share program. We've basically got the infrastructure, we've got the technology to track contracts and make payments to landowners. and then we've got 114 soil and water conservation districts with capable staff and all the connections to actually get this stuff on the ground. And we're basically doing what's considered compensatory restoration. So we're not working in areas that are polluted, but actually in the same watersheds where the damage has been done to restore resources using practices that we already offer through our regular cost share. So our proposal basically focused on 2 areas of the state. The Southeast Missouri Lead Mining District, or the SEMO Lead Mining District as it's known, is the biggest lead mining district in the world. It covers 8 counties in our southeast portion, and it's still actively producing lead to this day. And the settlement funds there, we received for this project $250,000 to use over 3 fiscal years from the American Smelting and Refining Company. In southwest Missouri, we have what's known as the Tri-State Mining District, which basically encompasses part of the Southwest, part of Southeast Oklahoma, or Southeast Kansas and Northeast Oklahoma. And that's a historic mining district that doesn't really produce anymore, but it was both an important producer of lead and zinc. And the funds down there come from, it's $500,000 total, and it comes mostly from ASARCO, but some also from the FAG Bearings Company due to some groundwater contamination. For our Southeast Missouri project, we're focusing on 2 watersheds that cover basically 5 counties, the Big River and the Black River. The Black River you're maybe familiar with from recent news. It starts in Missouri and flows down to Arkansas where they had some terrible flooding. But those are both typical Ozark streams, gravel bottoms, very clear, and the local economies get a lot of tourism dollars from those rivers. Go to the next one. Here's just a map showing, it's kind of hard to see up there. The watersheds on the left, we have the Black River, and on the right, the Big River. This is encompassing about a little over 1,000 square miles. Lots of public land ownership here in the form of national forests, state parks, and so on. But you can see a few red segments of the streams. Those are streams that we know are contaminated, so they're not eligible for this program, but the rest of the shaded areas are eligible to do the cost share practices we're offering. So in Southeast Missouri, we're offering basically 3 conservation practices, one being the C650 stream bank stabilization, which is a practice we offer regularly, but typically it's done, riprap blankets, rock weirs, things like that. And we have a commission maximum of $5,000 per project. Through this funding source, we're actually able to raise that up to $25,000 per project, which if any of you have done these types of stream bank projects, they can get pretty pricey. So that was a great deal for landowners. And then we were also able to use some private technical service providers to kind of focus on using bioengineering and natural channel design rather than hard structures for these. We're also doing WQ10 stream protections, which similar to what they were doing in Texas, is basically excluding livestock from a stream and then providing alternative water sources, pipeline, tanks, wells if needed, and then the landowner gets a buffer incentive for whatever production land they give up in that exclusion. The riparian forest buffer is essentially the same as the WQ10, except tree planting is a requirement there. And through our normal cost share program, these would all pay up to 75% of state average cost. But through this funding source, we're actually able to raise that up to 90%. So again, it's just decreasing the financial burden for our cooperators there. In the southwest part of the state, we are actually looking at a little bit bigger geographic area. You can see the green there is our higher priority. That's the Spring River watershed, which eventually makes its way over into Grand Lake of the Cherokees in Oklahoma, and then some other streams in southern Newton County. So like I said, the primary target are the uncontaminated streams in the Spring River watershed, and then kind of a secondary target of those streams in southern Newton. And we also have a focus here, because Southwest Missouri has a high degree of karst features, streams, losing streams, sinkholes, springs, things like that. And since some of the settlement money comes from groundwater contamination, we've emphasized those types of features. So our cooperators here are able to do the same 3 practices as in Southeast, the stream bank stabilization, stream protection, and riparian forest buffer. And then also, because of the groundwater component, we're offering well decommissioning, which is essentially paying an incentive to plug an abandoned well properly and then register it with the state, and sinkhole treatment, which would be fencing livestock out of a sinkhole area and then providing an incentive to the landowner for whatever area they give up there. Currently, these numbers are actually a couple of weeks old, but we've got several projects going. Like I said earlier, this was $750,000 total to be used over 3 fiscal years. And as of this morning, we've paid out $107,000 in cost share directly to landowners. We have $124,000 more obligated, and about another $125,000 that's in some stage of planning. And that's just some of the examples there. And finally, the last slide. And this is just a picture to show you some before and after on the WQ10 practice. Basically, we had livestock that were watering out of a stream. It was the only water source available. So the landowner got cost share to provide some exclusion fencing, alternative water source, and a buffer incentive. And you can already see within just a year how that begins to regenerate and all the benefits you get there. The riparian buffer practice would be the same thing, except rather than just letting it naturally regenerate, we would go in and plant a variety of trees along the stream. And that is it for me.
Very striking before and after pictures, Jake. Thanks so much for that presentation and inspiring. We've got a few questions that are rolling in. Let me just invite you to go ahead and enter your questions on the dashboard for our 4 presenters that just presented. Our first one is for Patrick in Colorado. Patrick, will have you address this question. Was data collected and analyzed to determine the cumulative effects of implementing the soil health practices on a scale broader than a farm-by-farm basis? Did you have a chance to look at the more cumulative effects there in implementing the program and projects that you have there?
Sure. This project was intended to be a baselining project. So in pitching it to the farmers and ranchers who would participate, we didn't know if there would be an indefinite funding stream. We knew it was grant funded to begin with. So what we wanted to do was get an initial data set into the hands of the landowner themselves, so that over the span of 3 or 4 years time of implementing their management, they could go back to those same fields and sample again, look again at the same data types and compare them and see which practices for them are working on the farm scale, and hopefully the conservation district will be able to be at the table at the same time. Hopefully we have funding to do the same series of repeat samples so that we could do that analysis at that point. Because it was the baseline and the starting point, we got to see the spread of different soil health status across our region today, but it'll take time to see which practices get us fastest to a healthier environment or healthier standards.
Your board meetings must be pretty interesting then, to be able to look at this data and examine it and talk together about what next steps, huh?
Well, Yeah, our board meetings are interesting, and because as a board, we've devoted ourselves to thinking about soil health broadly and really making that our primary focus of our district's activities. So the data set is one component of that, but incentivizing soil moisture sensor use, incentivizing farmers to continue to plant cover crops and to graze cover crops, and figuring out ways of funding both our district operations and making additional cost share opportunities. They're all balled into this idea of, can we keep our soil healthier and our farmers and ranchers in a stead of great stewardship and economic viability. Yeah, they're interesting board meetings.
Outstanding. Thanks, Patrick. Keep those questions coming in. The question for Jake. Jake, you mentioned some of the fundings coming from the collection of fees and whatnot from issues in Missouri. Has there been a reaction, public reaction, or even reaction by the companies toward the work that you're doing and the positive aspects of these monies collected?
Yeah, so this funding actually comes from settlements, or basically lawsuit settlement from these companies. And there hasn't been much public reaction to our program. Some of the funds have been used for some other purposes within the state, some land purchasing and things. We've had some public reaction there, but so far so good, I think, for us.
Okay. No one's happy about a lawsuit or having to pay money as a result of it, but seems you're really turning lemons into lemonade there.
Yeah, and it's the work we're doing is actually in the areas that are affected by this, just not necessarily in the particular stream reach that's polluted, but it's right in the communities that have been affected by this pollution.
Thanks. I'm going to also ask that question of Steve and Brad. Are you seeing any public reaction to some of the targeted work that you're doing in water quality? Is there some recognition for the district and so forth in the work they're doing there?
Absolutely. I mean, we try and advocate on their behalf at the legislature to continue the funding. We have a communications plan. We get things out on Twitter. We have websites. Get news releases and showcase the efforts the successful efforts that these funds are producing. And so I think there's some momentum being created, or at least an awareness, a greater awareness.
That's excellent, and always good to have a good story for the legislature, huh?
Absolutely.
Of success, and outstanding. I know Mike's excited about talking with you in a few minutes about how we're going to use that on a national scale too, for the National Association of State Conservation Agencies. Well, Tony, if you're still on the line, I'd still like to get into this mob grazing. Talk with us about mob grazing. It's a term I can't wait to use in Eastern Washington.
There you go. Well, by no means am I an expert on this, but I would suggest, just do a quick internet search on mob grazing, but kind of the concept behind it is having, I know this one producer that I mentioned, Harvey, the technician that he worked with, he had small paddocks, set up with hot wire, with electric fences, and he would put many animal units as he could in these small areas, and in some cases they were rotating them to a new paddock, once, twice, or 3 times a day. So the concept is just to get as many units in there as much as possible. Try not to overgraze it too much, but the concept is just, grab as much as they can. The cows will do what they do. They'll stomp everything down and then on to the next paddock. So again, not an expert on it, but no, talking to that producer and some other producers that I've visited with that do this as part of their grazing plan, they say it's actually not as hard as it sounds, not as difficult as it sounds, and that they've seen a lot of results with the organic matter in their soil. And I know this one producer has utilized it, and he's had a lot of his native grasses come back. So
some weed control, some native grasses, some good trampling, not bad trampling, but good trampling going on, a lot of good things going on there. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And intensive management, huh?
Very intensive, yes, sir.
Yeah. Tony, I just couldn't help but hear the excitement in your voice as you talked about the technician that was responsible for some of that work. Would you like to expand on that a little bit for folks that are on the line that, you know, are feeling the same thing or want to experience the same thing, please?
Well, you know, I think it just worked out for that district, for the Karnes County Soil and Water Conservation District, and I've known Harvey since when he started, since 2007, and he retired. He was the district conservationist there in Karnes County, and it just worked out that he still wanted to work, and I think the advantage of this project was having him there because he already knew a lot of these producers. You know, he had 30, 40 years of experience writing conservation plans, and so he was able to hit the ground running. And like I said, I think personally the accomplishment that he did, writing, like I said, over 100 water quality management plans was just amazing. And I'll say too, he's actually he still works for the district. He's just part-time, but he's actually even kind of contracted with our agency, and he's still stirring up some interest in other parts of the state getting conservation plans written. So it's a pretty, credit to him. He's doing an excellent job.
That's a most productive employee to get 100 plans written and see the implementation as a result of them. Folks, let me give an opportunity for Steve, Brad, Patrick, Tony, Jake to ask each other any questions. Any questions you have for one another? Any questions? Okay, now let me do one other thing and ask if there's any final comments that you want to make before we mute you and unmute our next set of presenters. Some comments? You forgot to say something? Wish you would have said this or that? Please go ahead at this time. Even Brad, anything from you?
No, I mean, I left out a lot of details on the subwatershed assessment work and the protocols, but, just for the sake of time, but a lot of it was GIS exercises, but there was some urban modeling through P8 and WindSlam, and then the rural subwatershed assessments involved the simple method and Russell II in formulating an erosion potential map. So that gets into the weeds a little bit more.
Sure, but you're willing, and as you said at the beginning, you're willing to share all of that when if the folks want to get into that with you.
Sure thing.
That's excellent. Patrick, any last comments for this round?
No, thanks for having us. It's great.
Thanks, Patrick. Tony, any last comments?
No, sir. No, I'm good. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to talk about the Lower San Antonio River watershed.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate your presentation. Jake?
Yeah, I just want to.
Go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, I just want to add that of that $750,000 grant award that we got, the intention is for 100% of it to go directly to landowners for cost share. And in Southeast Missouri, for example, those are really kind of low productivity soil and water districts. It's hard to get landowners to buy into this stuff. And being able to raise that cost share percentage and provide additional incentives has been a big help there to try to get conservation on the ground.
Outstanding. Thank you for that. Well, folks, we're going to switch gears now to our next set of presenters. And so I'm going to mute the lines for the first presenters and unmute lines for the others, just to warn you. So get to a real quiet place, our next round of presenters. Thank you so much for the presentations that were given just a few minutes ago. We appreciate all of those. They were outstanding. Got us off to a great start. So let me do a sound check then. I want to make sure that we've got Tony from Iowa on the line. Tony?
I'm here.
And Greg from Oklahoma? On 1 second. Greg from Oklahoma?
I'm here.
Shauna from Washington State?
I'm here.
Mike from NASCA?
You bet.
All right, sounds good. So this is our second round of presentations today. Tony will be starting us out here in just a bit from Iowa, Greg from Oklahoma, Shauna from Washington, and our NASCA Executive Director Executive Director Mike Brown. So it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker in our second round, Tony Figo. Tony?
Very good. Thanks, Ray. Yeah, I'm with Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship, and today I'm going to be talking about Iowa's state revolving fund and specifically the non-point water quality programs that my agency has been involved with since 2003. Agriculture is a big deal in Iowa. 1 in every 6 jobs in the state is directly or indirectly linked to agriculture. Just some impressive 2015 ag statistics about Iowa. We have a population of 3.1 million people, and we have 20.9 million hogs. We have about 32% of the entire nations. We have 7 billion pounds of red meat produced in Iowa annually. We're ranked number 1 in corn harvest, and in 2015 also in soybean harvest. I think the most striking stat to me was the number of eggs that are produced in Iowa. And this is from 2015, so around the time we had the bird flu. And Iowa producers produced 12.5 billion eggs. And laid side by side, that's enough to go around Earth 13.5 times. So with these ag statistics in mind, it's not surprising that farms make up 90% or more of Iowa's landscape, and cities and suburbs the other 10%. We have natural resource technicians and urban conservationists that work on both ag land and on farm ground in Iowa. Whether we're talking about sediment leaving a farm field or urban development or nutrient runoff from an ag or urban landscape, nobody wants to see our rivers, lakes polluted with nutrients and sediment. I think we can advance this slide.
All right, thanks.
Conservation planning is once again a priority in Iowa. Conservation practices are part of a systems approach to land use and production. Not every property is the same, and the needs from county to county and even farm to farm are much, much different. Terraces have been the dominant practice in Iowa. About 58% of our available funds have been dedicated to terraces, and that's a choice of soil and water conservation districts on where they put the money. And about 97% of our state funding has been used to fund 5 different practices. In the last few years, we've seen a big growth in management practices, and those would be things like cover crops, no-till, and strip-till. That has really increased from about 0% to nearly 10% today. Although we put out about $30 to $40 million in state funding annually, we consistently have a shortfall of $12 to $20 million each year. And this figure is based on actual applications on file with our local soil and water conservation districts. This shows that we have people that want to do conservation work. They just want some financial help to do so. The question is, will we ever have enough grant funding to address all the issues and concerns? And probably not. Iowa developed a plan to reduce non-point nutrient delivery, and we're now in the implementation phase of this plan. And the goal is a 41% reduction in nitrates and a 29% reduction in phosphorus. The cost estimate to achieve these goals is roughly $4 billion, so that's just for the non-point side. Iowa has several existing financial incentive programs aimed to reduce nitrate and phosphorus loss. In total, these programs provide about $30 to $40 million per year through a cost-sharing approach, so about 50% paid by the farmer, 50% paid by these programs. And
that's not enough. And the bottom bullet there is loan programs, and that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today. So clearly, with the $4 billion price tag on nutrient strategy and the 30 to 40 million cost share each year that we're getting, there's going to be a need for private investment in conservation, and this is where SRF is stepping in Iowa to make a difference. Our SRF program is administered jointly by Iowa DNR and the Iowa Finance Authority. And from 1980 to 2002, it was used exclusively for water and wastewater projects. And as you can see from this slide, in 2003, it expanded to address a number of other conservation and water quality issues. And its popularity has increased each year. Go on to the next slide. Because Iowa Department of Ag's long history of working with the Natural Resources Conservation Service and Soil and Water Conservation Districts, we were asked to partner with Iowa Finance Authority and Iowa DNR to help implement the non-point programs. Several programs have been established since 2003, and that gives private individuals and other entities access to low-cost financing through SRF. Although SRF is a relatively new program, we're putting out more than $10 million a year on average for non-point water quality conservation practices, and those are loans. So that's not grant. Those are actual loans and farmer investments where they're borrowing money to do conservation work. It's surpassed by millions of other programs, even our flagship Iowa Financial Incentives Program that was established in 1974. Go ahead and advance.
All right. Coming up. There you go.
Yep, we're doing a lot with our SRF. In the top left, you can see a typical terrace system and a row crop field. And top right is a grade control structure. Bottom left is manure management, so it's a concrete manure storage structure. And the bottom right there is a filter strip. Go ahead and advance.
You bet. Got the slight delay with the picture.
So
there you go.
Yeah, so we're also doing some constructed wetlands. We're doing some stream stabilization. Keep in mind we did urban areas and ag land. Bioreactors is a newer practice that we're doing in Iowa. And we're also doing some prescribed grazing and riparian corridor protection. That mob grazing thing, we're getting a little bit of that in Iowa as well. This is a program that I don't work with specifically, but our county sanitarians, which would be like environmental health officials, work with Iowa DNR. So they're installing on-site wastewater systems, and they're the local permitting authority. We do urban conservation, and that's something Iowa Department of Ag works with, so permeable paver systems, rain gardens, that type of thing. And then also manure management and roof manure storage structures are big in Iowa. So open feedlots are going away in Iowa, and the cattle are going under roof. So what's allowed Iowa's SRF to be so successful, and why has it become so popular? It's really a combination of a bunch of things. As mentioned, Iowa DNR and Iowa Finance Authority co-administer our SRF program. And by design, they've kept the technical people doing technical things and the financial people doing financial things. I think it's important, and I think they recognized early on that, you know, there's some strengths with the Soil and Water Conservation District, Natural Resources Conservation Service, and us that we have that they weren't able to do. And that's why we've got the agreement. So it's really been a collaborative effort, and to bring the banks and other lending institutions in to our SRF program so that we really don't have a credit risk if someone decides not to pay on a loan. The loan program is really selling itself in Iowa. We have people that want to do work. Like I said, we've got a huge demand of people lined up with applications on file at the Soil and Water Conservation District offices. And it makes it affordable. So through the linked deposit approach, banks are able to offer loans at 3% to the borrower. And that's typically about 3% below market rates. And SRF is really, it is a sustainable fund. So what money we loan out comes back to the program. So the funds have turned over again and again and again. Some programs in our state at least have deadlines and application periods. And we committed early on to have a ready when you are approach. So just imagine, like, if you break a bone or something, do you want to go fix that bone right away? And farmers see the same thing. So when they're harvesting or whatever, yeah, they see an issue and they want to address that right away, and they don't want to wait a year or 2 years for a cost share. They like to take care of that. So they're using SRF to do things right away. And I should point out too that they're affordable terms. So the loans can be stretched out up to 20 years for large projects. They can borrow up to $500,000. And if you're taking a $50,000 project and you're spreading that over 10 years, it really is affordable. And conservation expenses are tax deductible. So all of the expenses they incur are tax deductible. Eligibility, we have a set list of practices, but we also have something that says, or other water quality practice, or other practices shown to improve water quality. So it's not a really finite list and say we can't do these other things. And that's been helpful too, to be creative with what we can fund. We want people to do conservation work, and we want them to do work, and we want them to work with us on the technical aspects of these projects. We made the application process very, very simple. Tell us what you want to do, where you want to do the work. Tell us how much you think it's going to cost. And technical staff from NRCS and local soil and water conservation district offices help complete the one-page application with the farmers. And lenders use a web-based system to complete their part, and funds are transferred through a web-based system. So all of that is automatic. It's a web-based system. It's really, really effective. When we first rolled this program out in 2003, 2004, we had one of our pilot banks that are participating bank said they couldn't believe it's a government program. It just seemed too simple. So we kind of pride ourselves in that. And we've got a really rock-solid team in Iowa, from USDA, NRCS, FSA, to our state agencies, Department of Natural Resources, Iowa Finance Authority, Department of Agriculture, and our local soil and water conservation districts are huge. And I didn't put this up there, but we really need a third circle there of our conservation districts of Iowa, who kind of steers our local soil and water conservation districts. We've got an outstanding executive director that's really motivated and does great work and supports those local districts. All of this has led to $160 million worth of conservation being applied to Iowa's land. It's really been a game changer in the amount of work we're able to do in Iowa. So moving on to something a little bit different, and something that I haven't worked a lot with, but I understand the concept, and I think it's important that we talk about this today. We've done a lot with our non-point programs, but the primary use of SRF in Iowa is still wastewater and drinking water infrastructure projects. So this new concept is something that was borrowed from Ohio. And this graph does a good job of showing how this works. So interest rates on a typical SRF loan to a municipality or in Iowa are 1.75% payable over a time, usually about 20 to 30 years. And roughly 1% of this interest can be made available to cities to carry out non-point water quality projects with interest adjusted to the, so in the end, the city is repaid the same amount of money. Because the SRF takes a hit on the interest payments, there's a limit to how much the fund can lose. So the dollar amount per year does fluctuate some. The other thing with this, there are some limitations. So we're only doing sponsored projects at the time a city is borrowing funding through SRF. So if they did a waste project 5 years ago and they've already financed that, it wouldn't be eligible for sponsored projects. If we can back up the slide, Ray.
All right. Yeah.
So you can see there on the left would be a conventional SRF loan. So the city is going to borrow $1 million, and they're going to pay $193,000 in interest. On the right, with a sponsored project, they're going to borrow $1.1 million, and the $100,000 of that's going to be used for green infrastructure type projects. So they're doing a lot of stormwater BMPs with that. And then the interest rate is reduced to allow them to do that. So the amount of money that the ratepayers and the city pays back is no different than if they were to have done a conventional SRF loan. So it's really allowing us in our urban conservation program to thrive in Iowa.
So it's new, but it's really popular with the cities. And, you know, it's an opportunity to improve their local watersheds. And whether it's conventional clean water loan with a sponsored project, the cost of the city is the same. So you can see we already have $19 million, and that's over maybe 3 years that we've put out. And in the planning phase, another $32 million. So those are really, really good opportunities. And if you're not doing that, I think it's something for states to look at. Again, we borrowed this from Ohio, and the contact information is on the next slide. So if you're interested in sponsored projects, Patty Kale Finnegan is with Iowa DNR. She's our overall state SRF manager, and then my contact is there. And that I really work with the ag programs and the private borrowers on the urban conservation side. So thank you for the opportunity, Ray.
Thank you, Tony. Outstanding program, and I'm betting that you're going to get a few phone calls from states that want to do that, want to get that started. Congratulations on a great program. I'm going to move now to Oklahoma. Have an opportunity to introduce Greg Foxon. Greg, are you on the line?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, coming through loud and clear. Take it away.
Good morning. Greg Clarkson with the Oklahoma Conservation Commission. My agency is the executive or administrative agency for the state's 85 conservation districts. And you'll see in my title slide I actually include the icons of probably the core partners of our conservation partnership. I've just kind of took license to go ahead and give a shout out to them by including them in the title. And that would, of course, be the USDA, NRCS, local conservation districts, and probably a less known partner in this circle would be EPA, because if you'll advance to the next slide, Ray.
All right.
Oklahoma's non-point source pollution management program is actually funded by the EPA Clean Water Act Section 319 funding, and we're the pass-through recipients of the core funding and deliver the lion's share of the state's, from a state perspective, non-point source pollution management. And you know, our program is comprised of four key areas, and we actively partner in all 4 of those areas. Probably one of the most important things that you're going to get out of this presentation is the necessity for real in-stream data. And so our monitoring assessment program is probably the most fundamental element of our core non-point source pollution management program. What we're going to talk about today is the Honey Creek watershed, a particular success story, one of 55 that we have listed, and you can access through EPA's 319 Success Stories website. The Honey Creek watershed is a sub-watershed of one of Oklahoma's most premier lakes, the Grand Lake of the Cherokees. It's about 78,000 acres, most of which is in Oklahoma, but it does part of the upper portion of the watershed does lie in a couple other states as well. It's predominantly pasture and forest, and about 75% of the stream miles actually pass through pasture. It has significant poultry production in the landscape as well. Again, it's a sub-watershed of Grand Lake, and the lake itself has had historic issues with nutrients and associated eutrophication, as well as dissolved oxygen turbidity and other causes as far as actual listing on the state's 303D list. It is one of Oklahoma's top non-point source pollution management priority watersheds. Honey Creek itself was listed for pathogens, and there were some concerns, obviously, for some associated pollutants in terms of nutrients and turbidity and other issues. And the bottom line is the watershed is a reflection of a lot of what we see in this area in terms of degraded riparian area and stream corridor condition, as you can see in the inset photograph there in the slide. Next slide. Overview of this project is 2006. We actually began the effort again using Section 319 in order to implement the effort. We began an extensive monitoring program at that point in time to collect the baseline data. We hired a local coordinator and organized a stakeholder group known as a watershed advisory group, and that group is comprised of local folks from producers to other folks that have an interest in the watershed and its management. We always conduct usually some preliminary modeling to determine source areas and target, the limited resources we have most effectively. And we started implementation in that year. We expanded the concept in 2007 to include an actual demonstration farm that would be someone that we would actually, a local producer that we would contract with to basically do a system of conservation practices that we would pay 100% for, and then they would agree then to be a demonstration throughout the project for education and outreach. 2011, we expanded that to meet extending demand. Next slide. Just a real quick slide here showing that one of the first things we do obviously is outreach, and you can see just a capture of at least some of the efforts towards that. We can't say enough about the importance of having a local person, hiring a local person to conduct these projects, putting them in a local conservation district office within the watershed, because we have a much greater chance obviously of making those connections than someone in the ivory tower of Oklahoma City, so to speak. Next slide. Okay, so as far as the project in terms of actual activity and implementation, I'm just going to put a summary here that we had nearly 130 cooperators that actually participated, spent over $3 million. 2/3 of that was actually Section 319 funds, as well as matching funds from the state. And then 1/3 of that obviously is from producers, and so that's important to have the shout out for the producers' contribution in that. That's often sometimes lost in the concepts here. I have an implementation summary for those that want to kind of delve into a little bit more of the specifics as far as what that money went to. The key thing again was the degraded focus on the degraded riparian area and trying to get some establishments and protection. So exclusion fencing and or alternative waters to get the loafing areas outside of the stream were very important. One of the most important things, though, in any of these projects is to be able to make actual statements about changes in in-stream health. And in order to do that, it really requires a significant effort, which requires significant funding to implement the monitoring and assessment program necessary to do that. We did that with this project as we've done with all of our implementation projects. And we did it in a nested upstream, downstream concept, established calibration and treatment periods, and then we analyzed the data using an approved national method to be able to correct for environmental changes in environment and attribute any changes in water quality to conservation. As far as the results, and this is just a very brief summary of other results that were a part of this project, we actually saw a reduction in pathogens, particularly E. coli, and achieved a delisting, which resulted in a success story. We've also saw reduced nutrients as well, 28% reduction in phosphorus and 35% in nitrogen. Oklahoma is very successful in terms of implementing its non-point source pollution management program, and that's for a couple of reasons. Principally, the conservation partnership of our agency along with local conservation districts and then USDA NRCS. We enjoy a fantastic relationship with our USDA NRCS partners, and because of that, we're able to effectively deliver these programs. And Honey Creek, as you'll see, was actually a 2016 success story for EPA's 319 success stories. And if you want to access this very quickly, go to Google, type in EPA 319 success, and it'll bring up the link to this map, or to the map of the United States, and you can drill into states and see what your state has done in terms of reporting here. The most important thing here, though, aside from the partnership, is again, the Conservation Commission's implementation of monitoring and assessment to provide the in-stream data to show and document water quality improvements in Working Lands America, and it is absolutely happening. We have the data to show that and the success stories to trumpet because of that. But again, and I'll tell you that the majority of these success stories that you see listed here, matter of fact, probably 98% of them are not really even implementation efforts that we funded as a state, but they're more the documentation using 319 monies in terms of our monitoring and assessment of Working Lands America conservation, which would be predominantly USDA NRCS funds that went out through EQIP and other programs. So I invite you to go visit that website. And I basically have kind of summed up what I just spoke about. Most importantly, obviously, is the monitoring. I just can't stress that enough. Having a long-standing program and interaction locally and an effectual relationship with our NRCS state office and our conservation districts, and having that local person out there that was basically born and raised in that area and can make those connections, very, very important. And then I want to give a shout out, obviously, to our primary funding, and that is through the EPA Section 319 from the Clean Water Act funding in terms of our base programs. We receive a great support from them and great support for what we're doing here in conservation in Oklahoma.
Thanks so much, Greg. Outstanding presentation, and I'm inspired to go up and take a look at our state's activities and activities across the nation there. That's quite a website, isn't it?
It is. Very good.
Thank you so much. And I appreciated your comments about working lands conservation across America, a phrase that we use quite often, and we've got the success stories to prove it. Thanks so much, Greg. We'll be back to you with questions in a bit.
Welcome.
It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Shauna Joy, coming to us from Washington State on the Clallam Conservation District success in the Dungeness area. Shauna, are you on the line?
Good morning, everyone. Yes, I am. I'm Shauna Joy. I'm the Puget Sound Regional Manager for the Washington State Conservation Commission. And we work with the 45 districts located in Washington State, as well as administer some statewide programs through those districts. And what I'll be talking about today is specifically Clallam Conservation District and their work to improve the water quality in Dungeness Bay. And as you look at this map, you get a sense of where Clallam Conservation District and the Dungeness watershed are located, clear up on the northern end of the Olympic Peninsula in Washington. Historically, a very high-quality shellfish growing area for commercial and tribal interests, but water quality was declining in the bay, largely due to fecal coliform pollution, and those shellfish growing acreages were downgraded or closed completely to harvest. And that was a big deal. The local entities recognized they needed to do something. And the Conservation District worked to pull together some key partners, the Jamestown Clallam Tribe, Stream Keepers, which was a 501c3, as well as Clallam County Health Department, to see what they could do to address this issue. And you see a picture there where they're being recognized for their partnership work in 2015. So how did they do it? They got together and formed a pollution identification and correction program, which the Conservation District staff actually wrote an implementation plan to set up that program, working in partnership with the County Health Department. And then the group grew to the SQUIM Dungeness Clean Water Work Group, which includes tribal partners, stream keepers, local agency staff such as myself, and our Department of Ecology staff participate in that work group. And they pinpointed specific areas they needed to work on to address that non-point pollution. And then they set out and sought technical and financial assistance resources to provide to landowners to address the issue. And the State Conservation Commission actually provides funding to the district for both technical and cost share resources for landowners through our shellfish funding program. But also, the Washington State Department of Health provides Department of Health dollars into the PIC program as well, led by the county for those funds. And they expanded their services. They were focusing primarily on livestock practices for many years and realized they just weren't getting to where they needed to be. in water quality improvement. So they became the first district in Washington State to provide cost share for on-site septics, repair and replacement. And by doing that, they've really begun to see improvements to water quality. It was also important that they held their partners accountable and really improved communications amongst each other. In the past, the county did their own thing, the district did their own thing, the tribe did their own thing, and working together, they were able to really understand there were some main gaps that they were seeing. So they started this group back in 2007, and in 2015, they began to see success. It took a while, but 728 acres of shellfish growing area, the area you see in the yellow on the map there, has now been upgraded from closed to conditionally approved, and that means that shellfish harvest is open for certain times of the year. There's still a ways to go to get those acreages completely approved, meaning they can harvest year-round, but this is a huge success, and there's been a lot of recognition for the district and their partners around that success, but still more work to do. I'm going to keep it short today because I'm hoping all of you have a chance to follow this link. Washington Grown, which is the local television program here in our state, worked with Clallam CD and their partners to produce a short video that goes more in depth on this project and the success that they've achieved. So if you follow that link, you'll also find this video on whyconservationworks.com. It's only 3 minutes. It's worth watching. I hope everyone takes the time to do so. And feel free to send me any questions. I'm happy to go into more depth about this another time, and I hope I see everyone at our annual meeting in Nebraska this year as well. And that's all for me, Ray.
Thanks, Shauna. I sure appreciate that presentation, and isn't it great that those oyster beds are starting to open up again. Let's take some questions for the three speakers. Mike, if that's okay, and then we'll go to your presentation.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. So Iowa, what is the demand for the loan funds? Is it hard to encourage landowners and farmers to apply for those loan funds?
In 2004, when we started, yeah, it was a lot of training of the soil and water conservation districts and the lenders across the state. We have 100 districts in Iowa, and we have now signed up with as participating lenders, over 400 lenders. So the word's out there, and the trend is when our cost share numbers went down, our loan numbers went up. A nice thing about our loans, we can use our loans in conjunction with the federal programs like EQIP and CSP. We can also use it in conjunction with our other state funds. But about 30% of the people using SRF, it's their sole funding source. So the folks that have been on waiting lists or whatever because their projects aren't a huge priority in the district, maybe it's a practice that they don't typically fund, that's where SRF is stepping in to help. So there is a demand for the funds, yes.
Thanks so much, Tony. It's an exciting program, the ability to be able to do that low interest loan, and I hope it also expands where you can use the interest later on, like you described, that is brought back in, and even more loans are made at that point.
Yeah, and those are really municipal projects. So when a city's borrowing money for a wastewater project, that's when they're able to use that interest locally for watershed projects. So they're usually doing stream stabilization. They're doing some permeable paver parking lots, some bioretention, rain gardens, those types of things in their communities.
Outstanding. Greg, you mentioned education, and that one slide that showed the various participants and just a tremendous amount of educational events. Would you speak to that in terms of the success of the Honey Creek project, education?
Sure. Most of our implementation projects, we always implement a core, education as a core function for those. And in fact, we used to actually assemble what was called the Education Watershed Advisory Group, or EDWAG, just for that particular focus. That was their whole effort, was to focus on that. we kind of carry that momentum to a degree. We don't necessarily form the EdWags as a rule anymore, but we still carry the concept to a degree in really pushing an effort to make those local connections. And I would just say that it's very integral, and you'll see a lot of what is listed here as things that have to do with the demonstration farm, things that we actually take people out and promote through the local conservation district and with our local NRCS office to make those contacts, to get cooperators together and go out and actually look at practices that have been implemented, systems that have been implemented, and actually get folks in the stream, which is something that I think is kind of unique to a lot of these kind of efforts that you see in projects like this. So we can make that connection to people to show improvements in, like, the aquatic life, for instance, the macroinvertebrates, the fish, talk about what it used to look like, what it looks now, and so forth. And that seems to really hit home very, very quickly with people when you get them out and start showing them things like that.
Outstanding. And you, just like Tony from Texas, mentioned that local person. Talk with us about that local personal connection.
Well, without question, we failed in the first project or two that we tried to implement because we did not have that. We tried to implement these projects remotely, from the offices here in Oklahoma City, making trips out there back and forth. It just did not work, and very quickly came to realize, and common sense will tell you, that having a person that actually was born and raised or spent a majority of their time in that area and have those connections, know the local conservation district folks, and their parents are actually longtime producers within the watershed. That's the case for two of our current coordinators right now. That's just good business. That's easy business because those people already have the established relational networks. They already know the producers in those watersheds, and it just makes it so much simpler and so much straight to the source, if you will, in terms of making these contacts. Can't emphasize enough how important that is. And to house them locally, which we do. We house them in the actual local conservation district within the project area.
Outstanding. Well said, Greg. Lessons for all of us across the nation for a successful project that we can brag about. Shauna, a couple of questions came in for you. What is this Washington Grown that you spoke about? What is that?
So Washington Grown is a television show. It's a 30-minute show, and I think they air it once a week on our local network. And what they do is they put together these programs where they'll incorporate a conservation segment and then maybe link it up with a restaurant segment that's related, and they'll go out and look at different things. And the Washington Grown video that we did was looking at shellfish. The entire program was around shellfish. So we had a segment where we were talking with them in the Clallam Conservation District about the water quality improvement work we were doing for shellfish growers in the Dungeness Bay. And then they went to a nearby local restaurant and they did a recipe segment on a mussel recipe. And then the last segment in the TV show was an actual shellfish grower, and they were looking at the different procedures and processes used to raise oysters and mussels in Puget Sound. And so they'll target specific areas. Other Washington Grown programs have moved around the state and have focused on our potato growers, our ranchers, our dairies, and different things like that. And it's brought a lot of awareness to local food production, but also the conservation work that's being done in conjunction with that.
Quite a connection from the resources all the way to the table, huh? And in between even.
Yes, yes.
Outstanding. Well, thanks so much, Shauna. Let me just loop back with our presenters in our second round. Tony, any last comments and or questions for your colleagues, please?
I don't have any. I just look up my number and give me a call if you have any questions on our SRF program.
Sure, appreciate that. Thank you. Greg, some last comments or questions for your colleagues, please?
Well, probably my last comment would be something that might perhaps steal a little bit of Mike's thunder, but we can't emphasize enough how important it is to trumpet the success of our efforts and to get those partners. A lot of times the partner that may be funding a lion's share of what goes on the ground may not necessarily be the best voice or may not have the capacity to vocalize that, but some other partner can come in and help make that case. And I can't say enough for how important that is in the work that we do, particularly going forward. So.
Thanks, Greg. I think that's going to be a great segue here in just a bit. Appreciate you very much in your presentation. And Shauna, opportunity for last word and or a question for your colleagues.
Just a final comment. I think something I've observed in a few of the presentations today is the importance of education and outreach and marketing, so telling the success stories, but also investing in monitoring and data collection so that you've got some really hard facts to show your success. I think we can all say we put in a fence and we kept the cattle out of that stream, and that's a good thing, but having that water quality data is huge in telling that success story. Just a parting comment from me, that's all.
Well said, Shauna. Thank you for that summary. Well, it's my pleasure now to introduce our Executive Director of the National Association of State Conservation Agencies, Mike Brown, for a few words regarding the importance of demonstrating our success stories and using those in a way that we can gain even more success. Mike?
Thanks, Ray. And Ray, while I'm talking, can you pull up whyconservationworks.com and just have the homepage here on the screen?
Yeah, happy to.
Folks, there's no question that we've collectively been doing great work for a long time, and as time goes by, our work continues to become more sophisticated and more technically sound. However, let me share with you a few things that are happening and things that are being said on a national level. Let me give you a few examples. Just in the last year, and Ray and Shauna, you'll be familiar with these first two. Last year in Washington State, a group called What's Upstream put billboards up in the state that the message was unregulated agriculture is putting our waterways at risk. It's a call for greater regulation and less reliance on voluntary incentive-based conservation. Also, a report that came out in Washington State last year by the Western Environmental Law Center. The title of it was Agricultural Pollution in Puget Sound, an inspiration to change Washington's reliance on voluntary incentive programs to save salmon. Also last year, the Environmental Working Group put out a report. The title was Fooling Ourselves, Voluntary Programs Fail to Clean Up Dirty Water. A group called Agree is kind of a think tank out of DC, and they've got some heavy hitters on their board, including former USDA secretaries. A statement they put out publicly, and this is a quote, "Many significant agro-environmental problems remain, and there is growing concern that the traditional system is incapable of addressing them." And folks, we are the traditional system, okay? Last year, the Nature Conservancy provided testimony on the Hill, and I'm paraphrasing here because it was lengthy testimony, but essentially what they said was they had tried investing funding in conservation districts to put conservation on the ground, and their testimony said that investing with districts was not the best use of funding, okay? Another Hill testimony actually from this year, again from the Environmental Working Group, and this is a quote, "Voluntary conservation programs have largely failed to meet pollution challenges posed by agriculture." Now folks, I think this is bunk. I don't think any of it's true. I think a lot of these things are being said for organizations to help pad their own pockets and get their hands on on some available conservation funding. But the fact is, we've been doing great work for a long time, but as Greg just said, we have done a poor job talking about it. So what I want to introduce to you today is a new website that NASCA has put together. It's whyconservationworks.com. All right, and please write that down, because I'm going to ask you all to do something when we leave the webinar today. But this site is to serve as a clearinghouse, if you will, for success stories based on the voluntary incentive-based approach to conservation delivery. And we've heard some great examples today. The first thing I'm going to ask is all of today's speakers, I would appreciate it very much, and in fact, I'm begging you, please put the stories you shared with us today on whyconservationworks.com, okay? And you see we've got a few examples populated already. This site is brand new. Our goal is to have thousands of success stories from across the country to demonstrate our successes where we haven't been vocal enough, okay? Last year at NASCA's annual board meeting, I posed a question to our board of directors. I talked about the work that all of our state conservation agencies and our conservation districts do, and I asked my board, I said, can you prove that you've been effective? And immediately the answer was, oh, absolutely, we've done great work. They gave a bunch of examples. But I said, can you prove it? Can you prove the effects? And this gets back to what Shauna was saying just a few minutes ago. We've done a lot of great work. We see a lot of great anecdotal evidence to our successes, but perhaps we haven't collected enough data or done enough monitoring, and I know Oklahoma is an exception there, and that's why they have delisted so many streams based on their voluntary incentive-based conservation work. I was really happy to see Missouri is doing the same thing. But in many cases, we put the work on the ground. We know it's working. We've seen the positive results, but we may not necessarily have the facts and figures to back it up. So my board suggested that we figure a way to put together success stories and at least anecdotally demonstrate our success. That's what this website is designed to do. And it's not just for state agencies, it's for all of our partners who believe in the voluntary incentive-based approach to conservation delivery. Ray, if you don't mind, I would like for you to hit the Submit Your Story button. And folks, if you're looking at the screen, you'll see it there in the upper right. It's very simple to add success stories to this website. When you hit the Submit Your Story button, the screen you see in front of you now will appear. And my guess is you've got something written up on many of the projects and programs that you implement in your state already. A lot of this can just be cut and pasted into these blocks. And Ray, you can scroll down a little if you will, just to show them the different categories. You'll also notice if you have ever submitted a 319 success story, you'll see that this is a very similar format, and that's not by accident. Many of our states have already submitted success stories to the 319 website. If voluntary incentive-based conservation was the nexus of how you achieve those successes, we would like you to post those same stories here. So, 2 questions, and this will be just like getting an exit row seat on an airplane. I'm going to ask for a verbal commitment from our speakers today. Will you post the stories that you shared with us? And actually, Shauna has already posted the video of the program she talked about. It's on the site already, and also Aaron Andrews has told me to remind you that the more photos, the more pictures, the better. And we can also link videos on the site. So whatever you have, let's get these stories together and let's start telling our story. Okay? This is this is the first place we're going to put these stories together, that are to give us a collection to do a better job of talking about all the good work that goes on across the country. And Ray, with that, I will stop and ask if there are any questions. Aaron's here with me, who's our technical expert. If there are any questions that you have for how or why or when to post, we're here now. But we'd like to see stories hit this website as soon as possible.
Outstanding, Mike. And the one thing that comes to mind, I guess, when we send out a request like this, the average time to populate something like this, what would you estimate it would take to do that? Or maybe with Shauna on the line or others, they can tell us that.
Yeah, Ray, my guess is if you already have a story written for another venue, whether it be a report or what have you, then we're talking just a few minutes to cut and paste what you have in. If you have to start from scratch, I'll yield to Shauna since she's already put one in.
Shauna, I unmuted your line if you want to visit about that, please.
Well, thanks, Ray. So far, I believe we just have the video up. We didn't paste in a narrative to go along with the video, so it was pretty quick. But I know that we generate written stories, success stories from each of our conservation districts annually, and we publish it. We could put those same stories, basically copy and paste, right into this format, and it would only take a couple of minutes per story.
Yeah, and Ray, Bob Palmer in Delaware has also submitted a few stories just so we could get some examples into this website. He took his from 319 success stories they had submitted to EPA, and he told me it was, just like Shauna said, it was a matter of 2 to 3 minutes he had one in. If you have to draft something, I suspect it may take you 30 minutes or so. But either way, it's a minimal investment in time to tell a big story and to help us collectively populate this site and better demonstrate that the work we do is effective.
Outstanding. We did have another question come in, and I've unmuted the presenter's line because this question comes to us, and I think it's a most important question to cover before Mike's final comment. Overall, when you're looking at measures primarily in the agricultural rural areas, and particularly where communities, where residents, farms, and industries are intermixed, and you're approaching it for the first time, are you having to think about conservation and may perceive it as an imposition rather than a benefit? So talk about the inertia that you need to get a success story when you're having to overcome maybe some critics out there as seeing conservation as an imposition, not a benefit. And I'll just throw that question out there and ask for a volunteer to kind of address that. Got a volunteer presenter that would address how you overcame that, if you had maybe people out there that thought it was an imposition rather than a benefit. Anybody want to take that on? Well, Mike, they left it to you and I. How about you? Do you want to take that on where you've seen that occur?
Well, I'll give you an example, Ray. Many years ago, when I got my undergraduate degree in wildlife management, and this is back in the late 70s, our instructors, my professors talked about the anti-hunting movement and what it meant to wildlife management. And I can remember thinking at the time, why are we wasting our time on this? This is never going to catch on. Well, guess what? I was way wrong, and now Fish and Wildlife agencies tend to not make any decisions without taking that side of the debate into account. Let's fast forward to today. I give you some examples. Just a couple of weeks ago, back-to-back events. Over in D.C., we had the March for Science and we had the Climate March. And these are gatherings of folks who believe that agriculture in this country is essentially evil. They don't believe in using fertilizers or ag chemicals, and many of them believe that livestock production is destroying the planet, okay? That may be a small faction now, but it's a growing faction of the population, and many of these folks think that the work we do simply is a financial assistance to agriculture, so they believe it's wrong. And I suspect that we all disagree with that, but the fact is there are a growing number of people out there that believe that, and we need to be able to answer those critics, because the population of these groups are growing. And just like in the late 70s when I was wrong, if we think today that this anti-agriculture crowd is insignificant and we don't need to worry about them, I promise you we will be proven wrong in the future. And Ray, I'll toss it to you.
Thanks, Mike. I'm going to give an example from some coursework we've done, some practical work we've done with conservation district technicians working with producers, and in particular those that may not see eye to eye with conservation. And you can write these 3 questions down. I have 3 questions to offer to you in this regard. First question you would ask a landowner or a producer would be, what have you already done in conservation work? And that usually lends itself to a nice pickup ride across some fields and some discussion of things that they're particularly proud of. If it doesn't, then you know the next logical step is the second question that you're going to ask as a technician would be, what do you have planned and what do you want to do, in conservation work on your place? And the third logical question is, how can we assist you with that work that you want to do? All of it based on the landowner, the producer themselves. If they're a bit, concerned about conservation or don't want to do it, and we do encounter that from time to time, those 3 questions oftentimes will lend itself well to that individual being able to brag about themselves and the conservation work that they or their family have done over the years, and then what they want to do and how we can help in doing that. Usually leads to some success stories, even with the most concerned individual or the toughest individual to work with. Mike, it's my pleasure to turn it over to you for our closing comment, please.
Okay, first I want to thank all of our speakers today, and I want to thank everyone who tuned in. Please go to whyconservationworks.com and enter your success stories. And everyone who's listening today, I know you have success stories of your own. Please post them on whyconservationworks.com. Finally, I want to thank Ray Ledgerwood for his usual stellar work, and I'd also like to thank the Washington State Conservation Commission for their technical support in putting this webinar on. Ray, we came in right on time. Folks, I hope this was worthwhile to you, and I will sit here and wait for the stories to start coming in so we can make this website what we intended it to be, and that's something really big. With that, Ray, I turn it back to you, and thanks everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, Mike. And from Mike to you, I heard you have one job to do. Grab up a success story or 2 or 3 or 4, get them into whyconservationworks.com. That will conclude our webinar today. Thanks so much for participating. Good day.